Conversations. I'm so glad that you're there and ready for a divine evening of exploring, an evening of awakening, and an evening of heart opening. So let us just take this moment and go within to the heart space of that which is all that we are. So in this very moment, we recognize the truth that there is one divine expression that we are awakening to, that we are uplifting our consciousness to, and that there is room for all. That this divine space can contain and hold love for all. That there's room and space for those that agree and disagree. That there is the divine expression in everyone and everything. So in that, we just take that into our heart that is lit with the light of love and joy, expressing this beauty, this magnificence, this peace. And as we anchor in our theme song tonight, well, you better listen, my sister and brothers, 'cause if you do, you will hear the voices that are calling across the years. And they're crying across the ocean, and they're crying across the lake, and they will until we all understand that none of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. If one of us is in chains, none of us are free. When there are people in the dark, 'cause they just can't see the light. If you don't say it's wrong, that says it's right. We've got to give to each other, show one another that we care. Got to get the message out loud and clear. None of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. If one of us is in chains, none of us are free. None of us are free. So with that, let's take a breath and hold silence for just a moment. For I know for some, this is not the space for political, but if we can't find a space in our community for our hearts to awaken to a higher consciousness, where do we go? So there are a lot of things that are unfolding right now. So let's just take a moment and just breathe in peace. We hold this silence, knowing that the highest and best good is unfolding, whether we can see it or not. That there is a divine and unique birthing that's taking place. So tonight, well, this month is Mental Awareness Month. And in the BIPOC community, Black, Latinos, Indigenous people. Mental health is one of the facets that's overlooked. It has a long stem from slavery and people being enslaved. So I'm going to show you a video, and then we'll jump into a little conversation about it. So here we go.
Racism and mental health are connected in many ways. This video will discuss the impact on people and communities who are targets of racism. Around the world, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are the target of prejudice, systemic discrimination, microaggressions, and physical acts of violence due to the color of their skin. Experiences of racism not only cause distress in the moment, but can also lead to mental health issues that become more severe with each experience. Let's review some of the immediate and long-term effects of racism. During and immediately after experiencing racism, the fight-or-flight nervous system response may be activated. This survival response prepares people to respond to threats in the environment and can include anxiety or stress, a faster heartbeat, sweating, nausea, and racing thoughts. People can also experience sadness, anger, and have a lowered sense of self-worth and confidence. Over time, the cumulative effect of racism can cause chronic stress and a heightened stress response, poor overall mental health and physical health issues. Experiencing racism can contribute or lead to symptoms of depression, anxiety, and PTSD. It can also cause hypertension and other cardiovascular problems, relationship difficulties, trouble with school or work performance, and an overall reduced sense of well-being. People do not have to be the direct target of interpersonal acts of racism to experience its harmful effects. Research shows that being a part of a marginalized group in and of itself is a source of stress. Witnessing oppression or violence towards individuals from one's community can cause vicarious trauma and even symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress disorder. This is often widespread after instances of racist violence make national headlines. The economic and emotional impact of dehumanization and victimization can be passed down over generations. The ripple effects of history are still impacting many people in the present day. People from marginalized communities are not only more likely to experience mental health issues due to social determinants and institutionalized racism, they are less likely to have access to treatment for their concerns. It's clear that increasing access to mental health care is vital to promote the health and wellness of everyone. So, how do we make changes? No one individual alone can be responsible for affecting change. Positive change and healing requires a conscious effort from everyone. When it comes to such a widespread and ingrained problem such as racism, making a positive change requires us all to be a part of the solution. We all greatly benefit when the lives of everyone are valued and people can live out their full potential. We must educate ourselves on the history of racism and unlearn many things that are presented as truth by the dominant culture. Take initiative and do research. There are many books, websites, training, and other resources to help you on your journey. Don't place the burden of the time and emotional labor of this education on already burdened people from marginalized communities. When you see acts of racism, call it out and call people in to have meaningful conversations about the impact of their words and actions. Let's all work together to support mental health for all and make our world a more equitable and inclusive place.
Oh, that's beautiful. Psychic Hub, thank you to the people that put that video together. It's so informative and Really beautiful and well done. Just really awesome. So, jumping right in, there's so many things as we are finally talking about mental health and how it affects different people. Checking out some of the references, and on our webpage we have a link that you can go to under the Racial Equality Project. There's a link there that you can take and you can read some of the studies and research that's been done. It's quite amazing. So, I'm going to read a couple of things to you. Racial disparities are unfair differences within the system of mental health and well documented. Research indicates that compared with people who are white, Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and people of color, BIPOC, are less likely to have access to mental health services, less likely to seek out services, less likely to receive needed care, more likely to receive poor quality of care, and more likely to end services prematurely. Now, there is a stigma within, I definitely know within the Black community, there's a stigma about mental health and the absolute necessity and the value of mental health. In doing this research, I was really blown away how mental health for people of color and people that have been enslaved is directly connected to their slavery, to the enslavement, and we'll get to that. In this month of mental health awareness, this is an opportunity for you to share with your family, your friends, that this is a part of life and it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's nothing to be ashamed about. It is stated that Black men are misdiagnosed more than 70% of the time. Most say that there's schizophrenia, which just creates this one block. And usually, what's stated is at that point when they're misdiagnosed, they're normally in prison for either violence or drugs. And what's at the core root is this mental health that's never been accessed, that's never been qualified, and the Black men themselves not understanding what's happening with them, with their mindset. Also for Black women, it's been shown that, we have seen it in the past year or so with all of the highlight on how our police sometimes, how they are protecting people of color. And a lot of times when the families reach out, they call the police for help to have some assistance. It ends up with their loved one being killed because our police are not equipped to deal with this type of emergency. And just a little side note, these are one of the things, the name defund the police is a horrible name. What it really means is support the police, provide social workers and networks that help support the police so that they're not doing the job of everybody, that they can assist, but that is not their job to do. And I think as we find more states that give better support to our police department, we will find that these unnecessary killings will start to come down. I believe at the core that most men and women that decide to be police officers want to help our communities and not hurt. So, checking some of this out of how it relates to us coming from slavery. It says, in the United States, scientific racism was used to justify slavery, to appease the moral opposition to the Atlantic slave trade. Black men were described as primitive psychological organizers, making them uniquely fit for bondage. So within the slave trade, there was doctors and psychologists that created actual medical text. Benjamin Rush, who is often referred to as the father of American psychiatry, and a signer of the Declaration of Independence, described Negroes as suffering from an affliction called negritude. Negritude. This disorder was thought to be a mild form of leprosy, in which the only cure was to become white, which was impossible. And so there were papers that were created around this that gave slave owners, substantiated that Black men and women needed to be incarcerated, needed to be slaves, because it was an illness that we were suffering from. And in order to keep us in alignment, whipping, beating the devil out of them, if we were to speak back, if we were to get depressed or pout or be angry because we were enslaved, this medical document gave a sense of authority, gave a sense of justification that we were ill people. And this was a way to fight the illness, to beat it out of us, to beat it out of us. And there was an actual term. Let's see here. This term, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. Drapetomania. Drapetomania. In 1851, a prominent American physician, Samuel Cartwright, defined drapetomania as a treatable mental illness that caused Black slaves to flee captivity. I was blown away when I found that there are pictures of slaves fleeing, and they were claiming that the slave would flee because of this disease, this illness, this mental illness that caused them to flee. They would put up rewards and track people down, families, men, women, children, whomever. And there were some very brutal practices that were done to stop slaves from fleeing from this mental illness. It's quite amazing how it was related to a mental illness that any other reason didn't make sense. Like, people didn't want to be slaves, didn't want to be beaten, didn't want to work up, didn't want to work from sun up to sundown, not get paid, live in a shack. Those things did not come into play. It was the fact that he stated that the disorder was a consequence of slave masters who made themselves too familiar with the slaves. So drapetomania was a mental health disorder, and it was caused by slave masters who made themselves too familiar with the slaves, treating them as equals. where they could sit at a table, eat food, could respond to a question, could ask a question, could possibly even leave the slave plantation. Cartwright used the Bible as support for his position, stating that slaves needed to be kept in a submissive state and treated like children to both prevent and cure them from running away. Treatment, this is the treatment. Treatment included whipping the devil out of them as a preventive measure. If the warning signs of sulking, dissatisfied with a cause, pouting, speaking back, the remedy included the removal of big toes to make running a physical impossibility. Looking at that, recognizing that we are in this space right here now where some believe that racism is a thing and some do not. But to understand that from this culture that was created, that still to today, that people of color feel shame about treatment of mental health, how mental health was assessed at that time for people of color, for Black people. It's mind-blowing, and that there would be a phrase that slave masters and a physician would come up with to create that because someone was choosing to live a life of freedom and not to be a slave, that was the mental disorder. The claim that those who were free suffered mental illness at higher rates than those who were enslaved was not unique to Cartwright. So even saying that those that were free, they had a higher rate of mental illness. The U.S. Census made the same claim, and this was used as a political weapon, although the claim was found to be based and flawed. Even at the turn of the 20th century, leading academic psychiatrists claimed that Negroes were psychologically unfit for freedom. And as late as 1914, dryptomania was listed in the Practical Medical Dictionary. Wow. Wow. One of the things that the pandemic has shown the world that people of color do not get equal health care, especially if you have very little insurance to no insurance. Oprah Winfrey has done a documentary that we'll have a link for that on our webpage as well. She did this documentary, and it stemmed from the story, a true story of a Black man that went to 3 different hospitals to get help. He was sick. And he shared with him that he had put his father in the hospital from COVID, but every hospital told him he wasn't sick enough, you just go home, you rest, you be all right. They would not keep him. And so finally, exhausted, he was 56 years old, working as a security guard, working 80 hours a week. Finally, he got tired of going and he went home and sat in his chair one night and died. And so Oprah tells the story, and they have the documentary on YouTube, but we'll have the link on our webpage. I think it's really worth taking a look. Because when we start to understand that this systematic system of racism is not just about people, It is about a system that has been in place. And so we see it in our healthcare, where our children don't get the same type of care. Our women that are pregnant, we have more women that are misdiagnosed in their pregnancy. And then I think the percentage is 30% more than our white sisters. So the pandemic really showed how the difference for us all, how the difference in healthcare is affecting all of us. And I know some of you may say, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but what do we do? Well, as Oprah said, this is a call to action. This is a call to action to speak about it, to start having conversations about it. And if you are in the health care industry, and I do understand that the pandemic stressed the healthcare to no end, it was just beaten up and a lot of lives were lost. But I'm talking about the overall system of how we treat people that either have low to no income and how we treat people of color. How there are things that our doctors don't understand about people of color. And I don't know if it's for sure, but the appearance is that they're not studying to find out. There are differences. There are differences. And it's important that we start taking a look. I get it. There's so much going on right now. The fear of Roe v. Wade, that this would affect women of color. It would affect the BIPOC community. If you do not have insurance or you don't have the money, you won't be able to get the proper medical help. I remember as a kid when I was growing up, my mom shared stories about a couple of her friends that they received they went to get an abortion, and she called it the back alley. And the back alley was not necessarily in a hospital. It could have been in a garage or in somebody's kitchen. And the doctor or whomever was considered the physician would use some type of hanger to facilitate this abortion. And many women died. Some were never able to have children again. I was looking at a couple of the comedians that really got very serious and gave some great wording to this possibility of this being overturned. And Trevor Noah spoke of the fact that we as women don't have the right to our own bodies. And that's scary, that we as people, that the government would have the right to our bodies for anything, for any reason whatsoever. So I know it gets a little tight when we talk about issues that are happening in the world, but I also believe that in my spiritual community, in our spiritual community, if this is not a place that we can talk, and even if we disagree, to be able to just have the conversation, it is important, it is valued, and it is absolutely needed. So I hope that your heart stays open and that you stay available to receive. I know a lot of times, because people have classes on Wednesday, and so people look at kitchen conversations after the fact. So I ask you this question. How would you like to see kitchen conversations continue to unfold? Would you like to see it to continue within our community? And no, I'm just asking. I just want to know. Some people think that it's over, that we've accomplished, because you don't see as many of the videos or in the news. You may not see it, but granted, we are not through racism. We are in the middle of the storm, and our attention sometimes wants to wean off of what is unfolding, but we are still in the journey of elevating consciousness. We are still in the journey of waking up. One of the things that has been brought up is that what was stated, that just because Roe v. Wade may be overturned, that doesn't mean that any other rights could be overturned. Impossible, if you could believe that. That's impossible to believe. Roe v. Wade has been in effect for over 50 years. And yet, it's on the table even being discussed. And I guess you say, how does that work into mental health for the BIPOC community? Absolutely. The fear that you have no control over your body, that you have no control, or that you have to put yourself in danger once again for mental health, for health, to take care of your body, to take care of your situation, to take care of your life. Of course, it's frightening. It's frightening. And so, as we are looking out into our world, and my spiritual community, our spiritual community is absolutely a grounding place for me to breathe, for me to know, but it's also, I believe, a space for us to be able to stand up, to open our doors. Our Global Heart community gives out to organizations that are doing things in the world. If we are to be seen but not heard, to turn away and let's not talk about it, that's what churches used to do. And I'm very proud that the majority of churches now are talking, are speaking up, are creating a safe place that you can come and talk about it, that you can hear about it, that you can stay plugged in, tuned in about it, that you can understand that everything may not call to you, but something might. So, we are getting ready here in a few weeks. Some of us are going to Alabama, historic Alabama. Going there to recognize our history, our American history, with all of its drapetomania, all of its mental health that has stemmed from slavery, from physicians and men that created a scenario that said that you are mentally ill if you want to flee your slave master and live a life that doesn't require you to be beaten, treated like a child, treated less than a human being, treated less than some animals. Just sit with that. That we're in 2022. And this is still here. This is present with each of us in some form or shape. So work is still to be done. we still have work to do. Mental health awareness this month, also for people of color, Latinas, indigenous people. It's time for us to take the stigma off of mental health. Within our families, making fun of those, oh, they crazy, stupid. They wacko, wacko, wacko. We've all done some things like that. And to understand that depression is real and just throwing medicine at it. Sometimes creating a space where a person, they're just a log sitting there because you don't want to deal with it. Families don't want to deal with it. Well, it's time for the families to deal with it. Mental health is an important part of living every day. We all have moments where we dip into depression. There are some people that are in so much pain that they burn themselves and cut themselves just to check to see if they're still alive. This is a call to all of us. That if you have a family or a friend that you may not see that on the outside, but in their conversation, or if you see that they're withdrawn from the world, reach out to get help to help them. And we have to start speaking in our families that mental health is real. That there's nothing to be ashamed of about mental health. So for this month, this is Mental Health Awareness Month, there are going to be some different things that we'll have on our webpage, that links that you can take a look at, to read information, videos that you can take a look at to show, so that we can start to understand better ourselves the importance. You know how you feel when you don't feel yourself. Imagine if you have been feeling this for the majority of your life. There are many African Americans that are in jail that have a mental health problem that was never assessed. And so they did drugs, or they committed a low-level crime, more are incarcerated for drugs to stop the pain. I thought it was very interesting that it showed that 40% of the BIPOC community that does reach out to get help, 40% don't complete. They do not continue to do the work. So there's a couple of things that we have to be aware of. As a Black woman, I have to be aware of the stigma. My nephew has been struggling with mental health. And when I found out, having that conversation with my brother, and he was so involved with getting him help that he realized that it was beyond what the family could do. And so they, as a family, got together to get him help, because it hurts the entire family. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. We all need help every now and then. So recognizing that this is nothing more than health. This is health care, just like you go to the dentist, just like you go to get a checkup for your body. If something is aching and ailing you in your body, you go to the doctor. And so if you are mentally disconnected, a therapist getting in a group setting to be able to talk it out. Very important. So for me, one of the things that I've taken away from this particular talk today is that the evidence of slavery is still present. That from slavery, the mental issues that surrounded a people, the anguish of seeing your family taken, husband, wives, children split up, to come to a land that you do not know, to speak a language that you cannot speak, to have everything stripped away from you, to be treated less than a human. That until we start to recognize that this system must be broken and that we can do it, we are the ones that can do it. And that it's a real space. This is the time. This is the time for us all to recognize that this is just not something that's because somebody has a dislike. There is a system within our medical system that gives people the justification to not help people of color. It gives them the legal right not to. These are things that we can change, and we must change. I want to show you this next little video. It's a short one.
Self-hatred within ourselves. It's this perception that everybody else has around us. We've taken it in and we've kind of lived it out.
You feel like it's something wrong to admit that you have some form of mental challenge.
Taboo in the African American community it can be hard. Both my mother and father have that they're carrying that weight of our ancestors, of their parents and what they went through. So much mental damage was done to the African American community through slavery.
They'd much rather tell you that they got AIDS before they tell you that they have some form of mental illness. And it's just that much stigma.
When you're seeking help, when you're trying to become well, if you get a deep cut, you go to the doctor, you don't say, oh, that's a white thing. I'm not going to go to the doctor. My leg is bleeding and I'm losing feeling, but I'm not going to go to the doctor.
The first thing you have to do is remove the so-called stigma from it.
Because African American people need to really comprehend what mental health illness is before we can proceed with any other, area of achievement in America.
Today I'm challenged because I suffer from major depression. And I'm fortunate to find a man that treated the depression and not just zonked me out so I wouldn't be a problem.
Everybody needs support. Everybody has that one person or that friend or whoever, relative, whoever, that they call on when they just need to talk to somebody. And that's really what therapy is.
And I finally started to believe that I had a chance, that I was going to be okay, after so many people told me I would never make it.
That was just a little clip that I was really blown away by the conversation. And I hope you take this journey with me this month as we explore mental health in the BIPOC community, as we recognize the importance that everyone deserves to live a healthy, fruitful life. That being said, I want to thank you, Universal Spirit Center, for being an outstanding spiritual community. I loved one of the things that they showed in the clip was that instead of getting psychiatric help, more than not, African Americans rely on their spiritual community with faith to be that source to help. And so, as we know that definitely God is in all and everywhere, God is also in psychiatry, in the psychiatrist. God is in the medical industry. And so, let's take this journey together. I want to thank you, Universal Spirit Center, for all of your loving support that you do. It is an absolute honor and privilege. I am grateful for all the ways that you give consistently, for the ways that you show up all the time, for the divine lovingness. And there are many ways that you can give to our community through bill pay. You can send a check. And our most recent and newest way and the quickest way is our QR code. You can just snap it whenever you see it. Just take your camera, hit it with your phone, and it'll take you directly to our PayPal. We are moving forward, and you are a part of that. And the love and donations that you give help us do that. So I thank you so very much for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And in closing, I want you to just remember to keep your heart space open, that we are all in this thing together, and that we will get there. My mind is opening, opening. My mind is opening, opening. I am opening my heart. My heart is opening, opening. My heart is opening, opening. I am opening my life. My life is opening, opening. My life is opening, opening. I am opening. Our world, our world, our world is opening, opening. Our world is opening, opening. We are, I am, we are, I am. Have a beautiful evening. And remember, send me an email, gino@universalspiritcenter.org. Let me know what you see for Kitchen Conversations for our Racial Equality Project. What's on your mind? What's on your heart? Have a good evening and sweet blessings.